From the producers of all the great James Bond films, from Dr. No to For Your Eyes Only. And now, Roger Moore is Ian Fleming's James Bond 007 in Octopussy.
I'm Octopussy. Let me tease you with a peek at the next and most fabulous Bond of all.
This is Bond at its best. A spiral of spectacle and thrills. Octopussy tops them all. Roger Moore in his newest James Bond adventure, filling the screen with excitement.
Fill her up, please.
I need refilling.
What I do for England.
Octopussy is the 1983 spy film and the 13th in the James Bond series produced by Eon Productions. It is the 6th to star Roger Moore as MI6 agent James Bond. It was directed by John Glenn and the screenplay was written by George MacDonald Fraser, Richard Maybaum and Michael G. Wilson. The film's title is taken from a short story in Ian Fleming's 1966 short story collection, Octopussy and the Living Daylights. Although the film's plot is mostly original, it does, however, contain a scene adapted from Fleming's short story, The Property of a Lady. The events of the Octopussy short story form part of the title character's background. In Octopussy, Bond is assigned the task of hunting a megalomaniacal Soviet general, played by Steven Berkoff, who is stealing jewelry and art objects from the Kremlin art repository. This leads Bond to the exiled Afghan prince Kamal Khan, played by Louis Jourdan, and his associate Octopussy, played by Maud Adams, and the discovery of a plot to force disarmament in Western Europe with the use of a nuclear weapon. Octopussy was produced by Albert R. Broccoli and executive producer Michael G. Wilson. It was released 4 months before the non-Eon Bond film Never Say Never Again. The film earned $187 million against its $27 million budget and received mixed reviews. Praise was directed towards the action sequences and locations, with the plot and humour being targeted for criticism. Adams' portrayal of the titular character also drew polarised responses.
That's my little Octopussy.
By the release of For Your Eyes Only, the 007 Adventures have become the highest-grossing movie series of all time. But in 1982, as pre-production begins on the 13th 007 adventure, it is announced that Sean Connery will star in a rival James Bond film. In light of this competition, the question for the producers now is, will 13 be an unlucky number for 007? In the fall of 1981, work begins in Los Angeles on the script for the 13th Bond adventure, Octopussy. George MacDonald Fraser is hired to develop the story.
George MacDonald Fraser is a novelist who wrote the Flashman series, is famous for that.
I suppose our minds went towards George when, we decided that we'd try shooting in India, somewhere we hadn't been before.
He's also a historian.
Eventually, we got a script together.
He wrote some of it, and then Dick and I came on and wrote after he did.
Having decided to set the new Bond adventure in India, the filmmakers begin location scouting.
Having looked at Jaipur and everything that was of interest there, we then made a trip to Udaipur.
When we got to Udaipur, we found that, in fact, all the locations we needed, we were able to find within a sort of 10 or 15-minute drive of the hotel in the center of Udaipur. I mean, it was the most extraordinary piece of luck.
India is such a big and vast place, and transportation's so difficult that it's good to find a location that'll fit all of your requirements.
It was obvious that within an hour of being there that this was the place that George MacDonald Fraser had written about. There was the floating palace on the lake.
Peter Lamont and myself immediately got our heads together, and we thought that we could make that into Octopussy's palace.
At that time, the Maharana, who is like the king of kings, he's above a Maharaja, he was just converting part of his palace into it was called the Shivnivas Palace Hotel.
Very sumptuous suites. They're really for people on special holidays.
A lot of the main unit members stayed there, and I was the very first guest. And I think I was the first one to check out as well.
In the coming months, Lamont makes many trips back and forth from England to India. One almost proves to be his last.
There was a message from the radio. It said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're being hijacked to Lahore."
And they sat in the heat on the tarmac for about 12 hours before it was resolved.
I remember sitting next to this fellow, and he said, "What do you do?" So I said, "I work for James Bond." He said, "Haven't you got any of those gadgets with you?"
The flight crew overcame the hijacker.
And the captain put his arm around the back of the cabin door into the cockpit, grabbed the fire axe and smashed this fellow over the head. And as he kind of fell out the door, he kind of grabbed hold of the frame and got his pistol ready to fire, and of course just lost his balance and fell out. And then there was a rat-tat-tat of machine guns outside, and everybody just fell to the floor.
It was very worrying because we didn't feel it was a good idea for them to deprive us of our production designer.
The filmmakers also face being deprived of their James Bond. By the 1980s, Roger Moore's multi-picture contract has expired. Now his deals are negotiated for one film only, with Moore always claiming that the current Bond will be his last.
It was like a continuing game between Cubby, Roger, and presumably MGM. All about negotiations, you know.
As pre-production on Octopussy commences, it seems that, indeed, For Your Eyes Only will be Moore's final Bond film.
There was a lot of doubt whether Roger was going to do it or not.
Other actors are tested for the role of James Bond, including Michael Billington, who had appeared in the pre-credits of The Spy Who Loved Me. Maud Adams is invited to Pinewood to screen test with another potential 007.
I was asked if I would go to London and do a screen test. And then I found out that Roger had not signed up for the next Bond, and they were considering somebody new. You look surprised to see me. I thought you were expecting me.
So you are Titania Romanova.
My friends call me Tanya.
Mine call me James Bond.
It was an excellent test.
But I think my mouth is too big.
It's just the right size. For me, that is.
Although he's an American, he's, sophisticated, kind of has a mid-Atlantic style about him.
One of the first roles cast is that of the Secret Service's man in India.
Cubby Broccoli was a great fan of tennis, and he used to come out and watch Wimbledon all the time.
Armitage is asked to come to Pinewood for a screen test.
In the back of my mind, I was thinking to myself, well, I'm going to do this simply because who else will be able to say, well, they worked Pinewood in the morning and played Wimbledon in the afternoon?
But with Sean Connery set to do a rival Bond, the filmmakers take no chances.
It can be kind of confusing. You have two Bonds going at the same time.
There obviously were concerns.
At the last moment, Roger Moore signs for his 6th outing as 007.
Well, they've got a new young unknown actor called Roger Moore playing James Bond.
In the end, Cubby really instinctively didn't really want to use an American playing Bond.
But while Brolin fails to win a leading part in the film, Maud Adams is more fortunate.
I didn't really understand until the day of the screen test that they were serious about me playing Octopussy.
Of course, Maud Adams has the distinction of being the only leading lady to have appeared in 2 James Bond films.
Roger loved her, always thought she was one of his best leading ladies, and Cubby thought she was fantastic.
The things I've always said about Maud, it was always calm, always ready, very pleasant to work with.
As the production date nears, other key roles are cast.
Cubby was an old friend of Louis Jourdan, and they were socially very close.
Louis Jourdan, what a gentleman. Such elegance that he brought to the production.
He's a very suave man.
Cubby always loved the way Louis would say, Octopussy.
Octopussy. Octopussy.
A relative newcomer wins the role of Magda.
Christina Wayborn, I'd seen in a miniseries in America. She played Greta Garbo.
They'd also seen a poster that I had done with a Bengal tiger, sitting on a Bengal tiger in a sort of a Bondish-looking safari outfit.
The part called for a very athletic person, and she was extremely athletic and beautiful and a good actress.
Once again, I got to play with a Swedish actress. It was really quite extraordinary that in both of the films that I did, I had Swedish co-stars.
Although she and Maud were both Swedish, she was a very good contrast.
It made a lot of fun for me, of course, because we had a lot of things in common and we could speak our Swedish when we didn't want anyone to hear us.
Indian actor Kabir Bedi is chosen for the role of Gobinda.
I played more the physical villain rather than the intellectual villain. The sort of jaws of Octopussy.
Kabir Bedi came with a reputation because he was a big heartthrob in Italy.
Casting director Debbie McWilliams finds another actor with a reputation for the pivotal role of General Orloff.
Barbara had seen a play of mine called Greek in LA, which was a huge hit in a small theater.
Steven Berkoff arrived for his audition in a full samurai suit, looking absolutely extraordinary.
He's just a power to be reckoned with.
Steven Berkoff, the most flamboyant actor, was a wonderful Russian villain.
He gave it all this energy.
The West is decadent and divided.
Very talented man.
Production now begins in earnest on the film, whose title is a source of some controversy.
I did have some reservation about the name. I said, my God, I mean, that name as a title?
For a long time, people said, oh, you're doing the next James Bond movie. What's the name of it? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't think they've named it yet.
The lady interviewing me said, what is the title of the next Bond film? And I said, Octopussy. And she blushed and she said, you have to be joking. And I said, why? What's wrong with Octopussy?
There was a great debate about whether it would be acceptable by the censor in America.
I mean, it was a name that Ian Fleming had given to one of his short stories, in actual fact.
When I realized that Octopussy really was the title of one of his short stories, then I sort of accepted the name Octopussy.
Once you get used to it, it's like, it's not so bad.
On August the 10th, 1982, cameras roll at Germany's Berlin Wall.
When we went to Berlin, it was at the height of the Cold War.
It was before the wall came down.
The whole time that we were filming, exactly like you saw in the newsreels, there were the East German guards with their binoculars looking down on what we were doing the whole time.
The East German guards were very puzzled over all this, and it created a lot of diplomatic flack.
There was no question of getting permission to actually go through Checkpoint Charlie with James Bond.
The skeleton crew only shoots for a few days, but 007 leaves his mark. The following week, the first unit begins shooting at Pinewood, where Lois Maxwell finds a surprise waiting.
They gave Miss Moneypenny a secretary for the first time. This is a very beautiful young girl, and obviously I'm going to be pushed out of the Bond films.
She is as attractive and as charming
as I used to be. I was a little sort of annoyed until I found that she was James Clavell's daughter, and her mother was April Stride, who had been a model with me in London when we were about 18.
The first take goes less than smoothly.
Take one. Roger came in the door. He said, oh, you're not Miss Moneypenny.
I must say you become more beautiful every day.
I am over here.
Well, of course you are.
And I said, let me introduce you to my new assistant, Miss Penelope Smallbush. Whereupon Roger tossed the carnations. He said, "My God, Moneypenny, I know where your mind is at."
The end of August finds the crew at RAF Northolt, filming the amazing pre-credits scene.
The Beady Jet sequence had previously been scheduled for Moonraker. We'd seen these Beady Jets, and it was a great idea, and Corky Thornoff, who was the pilot, he came over to London and we had a chat about it.
It was a real plane, yes, it was absolutely amazing.
But getting the plane through the hangar requires some special effects magic.
It was built up with lots of models and stunts and foreground miniatures.
You can actually put an object in the foreground and make it merge with a building in the background so it appears to be part of that building.
We used a third scale door and a third scale model plane.
When the plane actually enters the garage, the door that's nearest to the camera is in fact a miniature and was placed about 4 or 5 feet from the camera to hide the existing door.
We had the hangar way over in the distance, the real hangar.
Between the foreground miniature and the building, there's probably 50, 60 yards.
We had a model on a line that we took through.
And it worked so well, we did the same thing when it exited from the hangar.
To film the jet inside the hangar requires another clever solution.
We put the actual Beady Jet on a car, just on a pole.
John, a very clever engineer, and he got a XJ6 Jaguar, and he stripped the top off the Jaguar.
One of my assistants in the back was working a hydraulic system to bank the plane from side to side.
We were able to actually put Roger Moore inside this thing and fly it through the hangar.
I always prayed that everybody else knew what they were doing, and they weren't like me. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just sitting there.
I would drive the car into the hangar at about 75 miles an hour.
The reason you don't see the pole arm and the Jaguar is because I put lots of figures in the foreground running back left and right to left.
We used the wing to hide the pole arm for the car, and as long as the camera was positioned cleverly with people and things in foreground, you'd never see the car.
They had trouble with the braking system,
and it took a few seconds to realise that the throttle on the car had jammed wide open, and were doing very graceful 360 pirouettes across the grass, straight towards one of Her Majesty's Air Force's planes.
John Richardson avoids an accident, but still must destroy the hangar in miniature.
It's probably only 12th scale, which is quite small. All of the corrugated metal sheets were made of plastic, but they were all stuck on individually, so they would come off individually. But each one was only, 4 inches long.
Meanwhile, another unit films aerial action for Octopussy's climax.
That was an incredible sequence. We shot most of it in the United States.
They wanted us to do a fight on top of an airplane, and we weren't sure this was even possible.
We built handles to hold on to, and we had hidden parachutes.
I came up with an idea that if we put a handle into the paint scheme, you wouldn't see the handle and it looked like the actors are just holding on to the side of the airplane. We had a door on the Twin Beach that could be removed in flight, and so we would always take off in a normal manner, pull the door inside, climb up on the aircraft, do our stunts, and then crawl back into the aircraft, shut the door, and land.
Back in England, the 1st and 2nd units combined forces to shoot scenes of Bond on Octopussy's train.
Up in the Nene Valley, there's a train museum that has, several miles of trains and tunnels. You get rolling stock that's from different countries.
It was a very, very difficult sequence to shoot.
Moore also has to do a bit of stunt driving.
We first of all constructed some special wheels so that it could actually drive along the track. I remember the first day taking Roger for a test drive down the track in it, and Roger handled it pretty well.
Richardson also stages a head-on collision.
We built a huge air cannon, and as the train drove through, we fired the air cannon. It sort of literally just clipped the front of the car with the train.
In mid-September, while the 2nd unit remains behind, the 1st unit returns to Pinewood to shoot selected interiors. Then, after a week in the studio, the 1st unit departs for India.
It was a beautiful place to be shooting, with all these palaces in the lake and boats and lights at night and camels and elephants and all the cows with their bells crossing the road. I mean, it was quintessential India.
Oh, India was magical for me. I never knew I was going to feel that way about it. It actually had such an impact on me for a long time after we left.
Roger and the other artists were staying at this superb hotel made of marble.
John Glenn decided that the camera crew and myself should stay with him in some sort of farm.
One of the artists went home, and Tom Pevsner, there was a producer, said, would you like that room? He knew I wasn't too happy where we were staying. And so I went into this palatial room. This was sheer heaven. I'm going to become an actor next time I'm born into this world.
The Maharana rolls out the red carpet for the film crew.
He was very hospitable and entertained us royally.
Quite often we would be invited for dinner at the Marahanis.
He had pictures of himself with President John F. Kennedy and other dignitaries.
And he would serve us his own rose wine.
It was so delicate.
And it took some unbelievable amount of rose petals in order to make this wine.
But all is not wine and roses for the crew. On September the 22nd, they begin shooting the taxi chase. Local interest poses a problem.
We were besieged by crowds in India. I mean, you know, wall-to-wall people. We'd ask for 5,000 extras and 10,000 would turn up.
There is no way that you can control the public's access.
You can't sometimes see what you're filming for people. It's a big problem.
I was actually scared to go out on the street when they were doing that.
Things can get quite hairy. You never know what's happening. You can never ever be sure a shot is going to be safe because you don't know which goat will run out of which alley at which point.
Suddenly, completely spontaneous and unrehearsed, a local on a bicycle went right between the sword plate and went through unscathed without even looking left or right. He thought conditions were normal.
The crowds are not the only thing that pose a challenge for Roger Moore.
Bond is not supposed to sweat. Bond's hair doesn't get untied. He's always in a dinner jacket. Everybody is wandering around in tennis shorts or swimming trunks. But Jim Bond is always out there with the tie, the smart suit. I was really more exhausted changing shirts, so he didn't look as though I was perspiring.
Back in England, the second unit continues shooting the train sequence. Doubling Roger Moore for much of the scene is veteran stuntman Martin Grace.
He's travelling along beside the train, and from that point I take over and do the transfer onto the side of the train, which was, to me, was like sort of quite simple. You know, it's something well within my capability.
Martin was a really expert stuntman.
Unlike a lot of other train jobs that I've seen, the actual roof was convexed, which made it much more difficult from the point of view you didn't have a flat roof with railings on the side. Climbing down the side, climbing underneath the train, coming out and climbing back up again. We'd been doing that for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then we had a helicopter for 2 days.
Martin had surveyed the track, and Arthur was shooting from a helicopter. I think he was operating the camera himself.
I know the first day that the weather wasn't very good, so we didn't even get a lot done. And the second day was the fatal day.
No matter how much one practices and how much you kind of go over the area, you know, there's always something that can go wrong.
I was climbing along the side of the train, looking through the window. Had I been able to look forward, I would have seen whatever the obstacle was and pull in, you know, or miss it.
They went up a track they'd never rehearsed on before.
And because the camera was still rolling and nobody had called cut, he entered the unexplored section of the railway line, still hanging outside the carriage.
I was in the helicopter at that time, shooting it from the air. Poor Martin, he misjudged the timing between places.
There was a concrete stanchion by the side of the track, which hit him in the thigh, took away most of the flesh from his thigh, and it cracked his hip, broke his leg, rib, and arm, and he still held on to the train.
It's a tribute to the man's strengths that he didn't fall off the train and fall under the wheels.
Martin survived it, but he spent 6 months in hospital.
Immediately, Cubby and I went to a hospital to see him.
We were very concerned. Martin had been a very good stuntman with us, and for a stuntman to get an injury like that is, could mean the end of his career.
Martin was very special, and he had a wonderful spirit, and so I was very hurt to learn he'd shattered his hip.
Roger was at his side at all times.
Martin became very popular in the hospital with Roger Moore turning up to see him.
One of the calmest, quietest, bravest men I've ever come across.
He made a full recovery eventually, but it took a long time.
The accident has a profound effect upon second unit director Arthur Wooster.
it upset me because I was there. I was looking at it through the camera, and I very nearly stopped shooting second unit after that.
Back in India, news of the accident reaches the production.
We all heard about it.
That accident really hit us very badly.
As soon as the accident happened, I came back to try and sort out what had to be done.
I got a phone call to come and see if I would take over.
You have to pull yourself together, and you have to put that behind you.
The tension when I arrived on the set was quite strong.
Very hard on the second unit because they experienced that sort of tragedy.
People were worried about the sequence and whether we could in fact continue the sequence and get it all done safely.
You have to keep the morale of the crew up, and everyone, is a great tradition in the filmmaking that, you have to carry on no matter what.
There was a lot of soul-searching over that.
The show must go on.
At the beginning of October, the unit in India begins shooting the tiger hunt sequence.
The whole thing comes from a short story, of course, called The Most Dangerous Game, where a fellow arrives on an island and he's told by his host that they like to go hunting and he's the quarry.
The Maharani had a huge garden that's grown into disrepair. It was an absolutely fantastic place. So that was the setting of our elephant chase. We were invited to the Maharaja's palace for a cocktail party. And as I came in the door, the first thing I noticed was a stuffed tiger. I said to the Maharaja, do you think I could borrow your tiger? So we mounted the tiger on a wheelbarrow and charged through the bushes with it.
You shove a tiger, stuffed or not, at the camera. For a split second, it gives you a shock.
And that was our tiger you see in the film.
Later in the week, the crew faces deadly animals of a different sort.
They got this snake charmer down from the hills, and you had to have 4 interpreters to talk to him. John Glenn kept saying, is it poisonous? Does it have its teeth in? No one knew whether this thing that was hovering out of the basket had its fangs and had its poison, and he put it round my shoulders. I was wetting myself with fear.
I kept asking the guy who was in charge of the snake charmer, so you've taken the poison out of the snake? And the guy says, well, yes and no. We've taken most of it out. We've got to leave a little bit in so that the snake will survive. I said, yeah, what is this?
I don't think Vijay was very comfortable with a cobra.
The thing is right in front of me, it's like 2 feet from me. And what happens if he hits you, the poison will come across.
Because these snakes were always getting out of the basket and running all over the place. So I didn't like snakes particularly, but we all found ourselves picking these snakes up and putting them back in the basket.
To be able to pick it up and put it in the basket and have the thing running all over, I don't think I could have done it unless the adrenaline was really pumping.
By mid-October, the first unit is back in England, where they create a German town square on the Pinewood back lot. They also complete the remainder of a scene which has been partially filmed in India.
When Christina Wayborn escapes from the fortress, it's an idea of mine about the sari, they wind them round and round and round. I thought it was a great way to escape.
We did the landing of that scene in India, of course. And when we get back to London, we have to do the pickup shot where I actually do the backflip.
Having an athletic woman like Christina to kind of help sell the idea, to make the first moves, were great.
John Glenn said, Christina, you're an athlete. Do you think you can do this? I said, I want to do this. I told you, this is my stunt. I want to do it. So I did that stunt.
The cast and crew get a special treat when Martin Grace returns to the set. In November, the Pinewood Studios backlot becomes home base for Octopussy's circus.
We got a whole crew of kids in, entertained them with clowns and everything.
The big tent scene was coordinated by Barbara Broccoli. That was really quite remarkable how well she did that.
We had close to a 800 crowd, I think.
The atmosphere was genuine. We were in a tent and we had all this crowd there, and we did have the performance going on at all times, so it was quite festive.
Roger had some reservations about, putting the red nose on and all that stuff. And I said, oh no, it is a great disguise, isn't it? We had quite a serious discussion about it, and I said, no, it'll be great.
They certainly had great fun romping around in that clown costume.
The final 2 weeks of November finds the crew back on the sound stages, where interiors and insert shots for the train sequence are filmed.
The scenes where I was fighting Bond on top of the moving train was the most difficult because there weren't doubles for that. We were actually rolling around, even though the train was not really moving and shot in the comfort of Pinewood Studios. But the fact of the matter is, it still hurts when you fall.
We'd arranged for Kabir Bedi to have a cable, electricity cable, up his sleeve, attached to the sword, and every time he touched the wheel of the train, a spark would fly. It was done on a 12-volt battery.
I was hanging underneath. They assimilated this in the studio because you couldn't do it for real.
Peter brought in 2 full-sized carriages from the Neen Railway, and we had a crane came in and held these carriages above the ground, above the moving backing.
We actually got our scenic artist, I think it was Jackie Steers in those days. She actually painted the rails and the sleepers.
They had the tracks on a long flat roller going underneath me.
It really looks as though Roger is under the train and he's actually, hanging on over a revolving backing on a stage at Pinewood.
It's so crude and so old-fashioned type of filmmaking, but absolutely believable.
I was there perspiring, trying to pull myself up, really exhausting. And that day, King Constantine came with his sons to visit the shooting. And at the end of the day shooting, he said, I don't know what they pay you, but it's obviously not enough.
At the end of November, the filmmakers staged the attack on Kamal Khan's fortress.
We shot a lot of the scenes in India, but then we had to recreate it back at Pinewood Studios. And in India, in the heat, in our skimpy little outfits, that was fine. Back at Pinewood, it was November. There were icicles on the set.
We were shooting in the winter, and we had all these scantily clad girls, and it was extremely cold.
Freezing, freezing, freezing.
And of course you had the problem seeing the breath.
And we were all pretending it was India again, but it was so cold.
We had the girls, most beautiful girls, doing all the fights, so we had to coach them how to fight.
They really enjoyed what they were doing. It was all swinging around on ropes and fighting and smashing.
We didn't have to put wires on them. If we built a rig, they were strong enough and trained enough to use it, to swing through upside down or the right way up or balance on the top of a pole.
There was no problem in trying to get a performance out of them. They were just delighted to have a go.
Wayborn really gets into her fight scenes. It is reported later that her punches to a stuntman's abdomen sent him to the infirmary.
It's possible. I am the lightweight arm wrestling champion of Europe.
In December, scenes in Octopussy's palace are filmed. The sequence features a unique weapon.
The yo-yo was actually an idea that George MacDonald Fraser had.
It presented more than a few problems because, it had to do all sorts of things. We had a yo-yo saw that was balanced and sort of, practical. And we had one that was on the end of a pole arm that would actually whir around with a motor drive on it so that it would, seriously cut through things.
They're almost inventors, they're almost worse than Q.
That saw, that was kind of scary, actually. We had to be fairly nimble at times.
The scene is especially trying for actor William Derrick.
The man that was deploying the yo-yo leant too far across the balcony and actually fell. Unknown to us, he'd removed some supports from the balcony so that he could get closer to the edge.
He broke his arm, and I know they were considering recasting him, but they'd already shot most of the sequence.
He would not have any of it. He came back, his arm in a cast, and said, oh, no, I got to finish the thing.
They shot the stuff trying to shoot it at all angles so that his broken arm didn't show.
In mid-December, one of the last major scenes is filmed in the recreation of an Indian bazaar on Pinewood's E stage. Production wraps in January with the completion of model shots and inserts. The filmmakers overcome the accidents and setbacks to create a rousing James Bond adventure. Upon its release in 1983, Octopussy becomes a record-breaking hit.
I was very proud of Octopussy. I thought we put in all the right ingredients. We outgrossed the other Bond film, which was satisfying to some degree.
It was just a lot of fun. And I think it's one of those Bonds that's a little different.
I loved playing Octopussy. It was great fun.
Even to this day, as I travel the world, people will say, yes, you play tennis, but the most important thing is you were in a Bond film.
We all work in cinema to leave some kind of enduring mark. And being in a Bond film is certainly one of them. I'm proud to be in a Bond film.
B.J. Worth and our aerial team, cameraman was Randy DeLuca, and the stunt guys were all great parachutists and all of international standard. And we used them a lot in the Bond movies. I think, to my knowledge, they've been on 5 movies. And they film in free fall and clamber around on aeroplanes. Sometimes we have to put handholds on the airplane so they can get a grip, because when you're looping the loop, the G-force is considerable. They always wear a flat parachute underneath their costume in case they get hurled off, which they do occasionally. The interesting thing about this team is that having worked with them so often, Jake Lombard, you can see there, who doubled very successfully for Roger. And you'll notice there's a slight shimmering effect when you're on an aeroplane. It's a vibration. The air pressure causes a vibration. It enables you sometimes to get away with a double that you normally wouldn't get away with. But very expert guys and great friends, and they work very, very efficiently together. Here they're just testing the handholds and having a bit of fun by the look of it. And there we go. They can't resist, can they? Here's B.J. Worth. He's doubling for Gobinda, and not doing too great a job of it, apparently. I'm sure we improved on that, but it worked very well in the movie anyway. This is Jake Lombard. I always remember on Moonraker we did the free fall sequence. That was the first time I met these boys, and they've been with us ever since. It all has to look very effortless, and despite the fact you're doing 200 miles an hour and trying to hang on for dear life, you still have to do a performance. Great communication, thumps on the aeroplane when he wants to ease off or flatten out or what have you. And I was very fortunate. Randy DeLuca, who was a brilliant aerial cameraman, and he had a kind of an improvised sight to point the camera. It was just a sort of sight you get on a Bofors gun, you know. It's a very crude kind of thing, but he did remarkable work. And to be the cameraman on an aerial, you almost have to be better at aerial work than the people in front of the camera, because not only do you have to have a 7-pound camera on top of your head, but also when you eventually bail out and land on the ground, when you pull the ripcord, that 7-pound weight is accelerated through G, and you know, it could break your neck quite easily. So he had to put a restraining rope around his parachute so it opened very, very slowly so that he wouldn't get this pull. It's amazing to think these guys really enjoy doing this. It's strange how you lose a sense of perspective. When they do a roll, it looks like the earth is moving and you're staying still. That's because we got fixed cameras on the aeroplane. So they're in very close proximity to the propellers, really, when you think about it. I think he had to adjust the handholds after this, I think, because his feet were off the ground for most of the fight. And also, I think he needed a bit more grip on his shoes. But they have to do these tests in order to find these things out. It's no good waiting until the day you're shooting before you discover you have to put modifications on the aeroplane. B.J. Worth and his crew were an integral part of the Bond team. They gave us great service, did some fantastic stuff for us, and many films.
349 expect one.
Background action!
Mr. Bond, your table is ready. I didn't reserve one. Guests are ready for you, sir. This way, please.
Stop. 3:59, take 3.
Action. Thank you. You changed your mind. I'm glad.
Are you?
Well, let's put it this way. Up to now, you are the least gleeful and by far the prettiest of Kamal's friends that I've come across.
And cut it. 3:54, take 2, C camera.
All right.
The next day, Mary and the other girls are at work again, and the 5 days of learning how to handle the oars pay off for the first of the many boat sequences to be filmed. Even in the incredible heat of Udaipur, Christina always manages to look like an ice cream sundae.
I'm John Glenn. I'm the director of Octopussy, which we shot in late 1982. I appointed Phil Ressler as the second unit director. He was an Englishman that I'd worked with many, many years before when I was a film editor, and he was the director. So I called him into the office and we went through all the storyboards that I'd designed and explained what I needed. And it was quite a responsibility. It was quite an expensive second unit. Involved the flying sequences, the plane crashing, the motorcycle stuff, all the stuff that was involved in the pre-title sequence of Octopussy. Phil did a great job. As you can see, the motorcycle stunts are always dangerous. Car stunts are dangerous enough, but I always think the motorcycles are even more dangerous. Here we have the Jeep, and that looks a pretty good shot. Why didn't I use it? Sometimes things go a little wrong, and it may appear that from this shot that the guys are leaping, which they are leaping actually to get out the way in case it turns over. But in editing, we have various cameras, and this enables us to take the offending pieces out and make it less of a leap, shall we say. So for this pre-title sequence, I devised this scene. We're flying through the hangar and everything else, which was all done just for a pre-title scene. It really had nothing to do with the movie. And it was one of our longest pre-title scenes. It ran for about 7 minutes. It always worried me that it took so long, but it was such an entertaining scene. And it was such a thrilling scene. And it was funny. I mean, Roger was at his best. Yeah, the planning on these second unit sequences where you have not only one unit, sometimes you have 4 units shooting simultaneously. We send them off maybe before we even start shooting the main unit. And I brief the guys, they all have a storyboard, so they have to conform in a way to what is written, because otherwise they won't join together. Then the advantage of that is, of course, is that before the main units start to roll, we have in the cam, we have the film. I think one of the guys must have got hurt in this because the Jeep appears to fall right on top of him in the sack. And I guess he was just badly bruised because I didn't hear any more about it at the time. But the guy's very concerned there. I'm sure he was fine. But, this sort of stuff can be very dangerous. They always make their own, take care of their own safety, stuntmen. There's multi-cameras, it appears to be do lots and lots of takes, but it's essential to have the choice, of course. There, that's the one there. I think he might have had a headache after that one.
007's first mission was to get through the hordes of fans who waited patiently outside his caravan all day long. Never seeming to refuse an autograph request, Roger Moore sometimes had the film crew tearing their hair as time ticked away. It's costing £10,000 an hour to make Octopussy. Like all Bond films, it attracts the world's press, and they're all eager for that glossy photo which will tell it all. Octopussy, as the name implies, is yet another completely improbable 007 story. Enough to say there are goodies, baddies, pouting starlets, and plenty of chasing by everyone.
Turnover. Running. Okay. 184, take one.
Some of the chasing goes on and in a train crossing the east-west border in Germany, hence the need for a railway setting. Wansford has been transformed to become Karl Marx Station. The film introduces several new Bond beauties, women like Magda, played by Christina Wayborn.
It's going beautifully, except I caught a little bit of a cold, the other day. It's been awfully cold out on location, so...
What part do you play and what do you do?
I play the part of Magda, and it's a very physical role. It's a lot of horseback riding stunts, Indian dancing, and going off of balconies in Indian saris, and a lot of things like that.
So you must be very fit.
I hope so. I pray I'm fit. Yes.
The film requires 60 extras, and there are plenty of volunteers. Some in Russian army uniform stand about rather self-consciously. To get 3 minutes of usable film in one day is good going. This scene lasts about 15 seconds, but took 2 hours to make. The actor here is Kabir Bedi, who will be seen later this year in the television series Dynasty. The Neen Valley Railway has played host now to 4 film companies, but this is the biggest production so far. The crew have been setting up for 6 weeks. Hiring the railway out like this provides valuable income to the trust. But while it's all a spectacle to the onlooker, it must be boring to a man who's played James Bond 6 times now.
I'm not fed up with it. I have 2 years off in between each one, so I really don't get fed up with it.
Now, I don't expect you to give away the plot, but what's it about?
It's about this agent called James Bond, who is licensed to kill, and his code number is 007.
Oh, we know all that.
Oh, well, you see, there is a villain. It's, well, I don't know, it's very difficult. Most of the action takes place centered around a traveling circus, which is owned by a lady called Octopussy, and she has given her name to this circus. Who gave her name, I don't know. But anyway, and because it's Bond, there are lots of octopuses. They are her trained acrobats, who also happen to be very beautiful young ladies, and they're fairly lethal too. And it would appear that one mad Russian, against the wishes of the other Russians, is going to do something that could spark off a nuclear war.
Plenty of stunts and thrills are promised in this section of the film, and one includes a rather unorthodox train ride for Roger Moore. It's enough to give his insurance man a coronary. I'm pleased to report, though, that all went well, and Octopussy will hopefully reach the cinema in June of next year.
Realize how many pounds, not pounds, tons of bacon rolls are consumed on a location. Gallons of tea. We keep thousands of industries going, bakers, tea industry.
That's tension. Right. Now, Tony, we've run out of
Carol, it's 2 years since you were on Sale of the Century as one of the hostesses. So, what's it like being part of a Bond movie?
Very exciting. It's terrific. And Sale of the Century stood me in good stead, obviously working with cameras and with a big crew. But obviously this is a much bigger concern. And I'm working with a lot of girls who are friends and I've known for quite a while. So we're just having a good laugh. It's been great fun.
And the Bond movie, of course, is an all-action movie. You're working with Roger Moore. How's that?
We've not seen him an awful lot. We do our little bit, then we go and sit in our tents or our caravans. So I'll probably see more of him in India because we're all going to India in a couple of weeks, so that should be great.
Last night.
Laurie.
Laurie? Like Bedford. He was born in Bedford. Laurie. You mean Larry or Laurie?
Laurie.
L-A-U-R-A. Guards.
Yes, sir.
You may well ask, what is the appeal of the audience? I don't know what the appeal of the audience is. For me, I really wasn't planning on doing this one. I came back by unpopular request, I think. No, I enjoy doing them. They're fun. They're hard work, but in the main, it keeps me off the streets.
There was talk, of course, of you not doing any more Bond movies. So, is this going to be your last?
I think this will be, yes.
Why?
Well, 6 is enough. It really is. It takes up 6 months of the year, and a lot of the other things I want to do, the timing is wrong for them. And I think 6 enough. I proved I can remember my name is Bond. No, James Bond, yeah.
Some newspapers recently have suggested that you're getting on a bit to play Bond. Is that one of the factors?
I mean, if you can do it, you can do it, can't you? I mean, Charlie Chaplin was producing Kids at 80. Which gives me 30 years.
You have, of course, got a rival in your old friend Sean Connery too, because a rival Bond production is being planned or in the making. How do you feel about that situation? 2 Bonds on the big screen.
I don't mind at all. I bumped into Sean and Jack Schwartzman, who's producing it the other day. On Saturday, as a matter of fact. I asked him if he wanted one of our scripts, and they offered me 3 of theirs.
Yeah.
Don't show any other seconds. Yeah.
From back here.
Women parts in Bond movies have improved a lot, in my opinion, in the last few years. It's always been exciting to be in a Bond film. But the part that I played then was not as challenging as this time. This time, I'm actually playing the title role, which you probably realize it's the first time that a woman has ever played the title role. And it's a very active part. Exciting.
In case you don't know Wimbledon from Forest Hills, Roger's actor chum is the famous Indian Davis Cup tennis player Vijay Amritrash, making his big screen acting debut.
Close up of that. Now close up of his foot. It's wonderful. It's part of making a picture like this. Rich, nature. I wouldn't keep going if I were you. That's not one of those friendly camels that you smoke. Hello, darling. My next leading lady.
Octopussy had its Royal World charity premiere at the Odeon, Leicester Square on June 6, 1993, and went on to break box office records there during its 10-week engagement.
Do
hear the cheers. They must be echoing throughout the capital, because here we have the arrival of the royal party, their Royal Highnesses the Prince and Princess of Wales. First Prince Charles. Oh, and Princess Diana has on that stunning dress which has rocked everybody in Australia. Americans have a special party where they paid £2,000 to dine with the royal couple for charities they were concerned with. And here's everybody waiting expectantly for the arrival of their Royal Highnesses in the Circle Lounge. And this is the scene as they come up the stairs past these glorious flowers. I must say the smell of them today was absolutely wonderful. Cream stocks and small spray carnations. Lady Anne Tennant making the presentation to Prince Charles, and Mr. Broccoli will make the presentations to Princess of Wales.
One of those marvellous ones you can move around.
There's always a hushed atmosphere here, and it seems that the Princess of Wales is also slightly hushed, but talking very intently to everyone in the lineup.
Been the most successful films of all.
Where we have 2-3 units and
beating even
usually 5 men on each unit.
E.T.
The hairstyle that so many people throughout the country have copied since the Princess of Wales came fully into our lives. I was at the end of those drop earrings. It is warm up here this evening in the Circle Lounge, and the Royal Highnesses are conscious of that as people wait to be presented to them, because of course they have to get in order in plenty of time before the couple arrive. I think there will be more people here tonight in the Circle Lounge than I've seen in a long time.
I haven't heard
We love it.
James Duro is Eon Productions Executive at the and Tom Plevsner, who is the Associate Producer. Prince Charles greeting Rita Coolidge, who sings the title song, All Time High, and Desmond Llewellyn, star of the film. Of course, he plays Q, the gadget man, although he admits he doesn't know anything about gadgets as far as his putting plugs on and everything at home is concerned.
When did you do it?
I haven't done stage for a long time.
Just saying that he hasn't done stage work for a long time now to Prince Charles.
There's some good new gadgets in this one.
Prince Charles asking how many gadgets, whether they're good ones in the film, and there certainly are some really good ones. Desmond Llewellyn with Princess Diana. Very clear view of this beautiful gown. Here I am with Lois Maxwell and Desmond Llewellyn. Very good to see you here. Lois, you're the official secretary and PA to M, aren't you? How long did it take you to shoot your part for this film?
I finished at lunchtime.
Well, on the first day you started?
Yes.
Well, how have the 13 Bond films that you've done?
Well, apart from different Bonds, 3 different Bonds, my parts become smaller.
Mine's actually become larger.
Oh, Desmond, now is there a bit of friction about that? You have an assistant too, I think, don't you, this
I
time,
know. Well, she's so beautiful, I have to forgive her for being in my office. She really is lovely.
What about this daily column that you write in this newspaper in Toronto where you live?
Well,
Moneypenny, it's called.
Yes, well, my publisher insisted that it be called Moneypenny. And I'm glad, because after all, I am the original.
What do you write about in that column?
Love, death, murders, human interest, loneliness, June brides, anything I want to.
You cover everything there, Lois.
Well.
Have you seen the film yet?
No, I haven't.
Well, I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, I intend to.
Desmond, have you seen the film? You play Q,
Yes, I have.
of course. Yes.
I've seen the sort of rough cut. I haven't seen the complete film yet.
You've been in all but 2 of the 13 Bond films.
That's
Have
right.
you seen a great change over the years with them?
Well, I think they've become bigger. I think in a way better. As we said, my part has got a little larger, which is jolly nice, because in the early films I was sort of stuck in my workshop and now I am, as they say, in the field.
I know you were in a hot air balloon this time. Now, what was that experience like?
Well, it was great fun. Luckily, it was tethered. I mean, I did go up about 50 feet, but there was a long rope holding me down to the ground, because otherwise I think Roger and I might have disappeared.
Well, this is really a bonus. Liza Minnelli was just passing us. Hello, Liza.
Hello.
Congratulations on your show, which finished last night. It's been an outstanding success in London, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Very happy to say that. It's been a great thrill for me to do, too.
How long have you been doing that? 3 weeks?
Yes, but everybody was wonderful. You know, and people came, I got to see old friends. And tonight's exciting, isn't it?
Now, are you an enthusiast about Bond?
Oh, indeed, yes. I think everybody is, aren't they?
Well, yes, I think they are on the whole. What is it you like about coming to London on these sort of occasions?
I lived here and I went to school here. And it's as much of my home as New York is.
Well, I'm jolly glad you were home tonight, if you like. The beautiful, seductive Magda. I find it jolly difficult to be here, I must say, on these occasions.
I find it jolly difficult too.
Christina Wayborn, welcome. This is your big screen debut. Now, what a film to start with.
Yes, what a film to start with. It's been wonderful.
How did you actually get the bar? The Bond film?
Well, actually, it was Barbara Broccoli, the daughter of the producer, who had seen me in Garbo, a film made in America for television. And she told her daddy. And I think that's why I'm here.
Now, your English is perfect, but of course you, for Garbo, you kept your Swedish accent.
Well, actually, I had to get it back for Garbo, because I had worked so hard at losing it, and it was even maybe more difficult to get it back than to lose it, because you have to be very precise. She was from southern Stockholm, I'm from the south of Sweden, so it was a stretch.
When you were in Sweden still, you were a very fit, I'm not suggesting you're not now, young lady actually. You ran 100 metres in some staggering 11.3, I think, or something.
Yes, it has declined. Getting on a bit now, but I still get around.
But the physical side was important because you did a marvellous stunt.
Yes, I do all the stunts in the film. There is one backflip over a balcony where I leave Bond, and it was a 68-foot drop. So we did the landing in India and the backflip at Pinewood Studios.
Did it work first time, Christina?
The landing took about 3 takes. The actual backflip, my double hurt her back, so I actually had to stand in for my stand-in. And it was, quite difficult to get it right.
You've survived well and you look beautiful. Christina Wayborn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is, of course, different venue for you, because normally you're exciting people with your tennis in the Indian Davis Cup.
Yes, thank you very much. I always keep telling everybody that I've been acting for 15 years, so this is just another year of acting.
What do you mean on the tennis court?
On the tennis court, yes.
I suppose you perhaps think that some of the acting that goes on with some of these American tennis players is a bit hard to take.
Well, there is a lot of show business in tennis, I think, and it's a form of entertainment, and the movies is a mass entertainment, and tennis is a little more exclusive.
Tell us about your part, Vijay, in this, because you obviously revel in it from what I've seen in the film.
Well, I think the most important thing is that I really enjoy doing it. Worked quite a few weeks on the film, and the people who were involved in making of the film were absolutely the easiest and best people to work with. And most of my scenes were with Roger, and he made things very, very easy and comfortable for me, and I really had a good time doing it.
There were some lovely moments when people tried to simulate tennis matches in the crowd scene in the market in India. That was lovely. They were going like that, weren't they?
Yeah, I think that came off pretty well. It was a good pun, and it was used well, and I think John Glenn, the director, did a tremendous job in putting that scene together at the right time.
It was your first big film.
First feature film.
So what happens now, Vijay?
Well, I try to keep acting on the tennis court a little longer, and a few offers have been coming here and there, and I think I'm going to wait a bit and maybe do a couple more. I mean, it all depends on what people think.
I think they'll think it's great, and I think you look wonderful. Even your buttons have got tennis rackets on them. Vijay, thank you very much.
Maud Adams, who plays the title role, Octopussy. Now, apart from Bond, I think you're the only major star who has appeared in 2 of the Bond sequences. Were you surprised to be asked back?
Oh, yes, of course I was. As a matter of fact, the first time I heard about it, I thought somebody made a mistake. I thought some casting agent obviously didn't realize that I had already done one. But I'm very pleased that I had an opportunity to do this.
Is this a step forward in your career, would you say?
I think it is always very good for an actress to be associated with a commercial success. And since for the last few years I have been lucky enough to do some critical successes, but not a major commercial one, this I think is almost a guaranteed in that regard, and I think that certainly will help me.
You were born in Sweden, you now live in the States, you speak a number of other languages. Do you ever get a chance to use them these days?
I speak French occasionally. I just worked in Italy, so I spoke some Italian, although the film was being made in English.
You began, of course, as a top model. How difficult was it to make the break from that into acting?
I think originally it helped me because it was, as is very often the case for models, it was more or less the character didn't require very much more than me being what I was at the time.
Beautiful.
Yes, and I also did have some commercial value because I was a top model, so people did recognize me. But obviously the part was not very demanding, and it is very hard, if you're lucky enough to stay in the profession for a long time, to get out of the casting situation, which is often the case with most actors. If you're successful at playing one particular kind of a part, whether it's just being beautiful, it is very hard to get out of that. Yes.
But do you look forward to the day when you can play an old crone or Lady Macbeth?
Oh yes, well, obviously, of course. I'm very pleased to say the last couple of years I've had an opportunity to play other parts, as in Chicago Story, which you've seen here on television in England, where I play a doctor who's certainly not glamorous, and playing for time, and Tattoo I consider a dramatic role, a very major part for me.
Maud Adams, who gets tentacles around James Bond in this movie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Louis Jourdan, with the exception of some nasties like Dracula, we have an image of you on the screen as rather a charmer, I think, and now you turn up as a real skunk in Octopussy.
Yes, of course. I play indeed the villain. But
what's the key to doing that?
I think the key is to try to make villainy as attractive as possible, since James Bond is perfection about what is good and what is right. I have tried to make my villain perfect about what is bad, evil, and wrong, but always with humor, because humor, of course, is the key to the Bond pictures, the key to this evening, and I hope that the audience will laugh with us on the screen.
I'm sure they will. It looked a delightful location to spend a few weeks in. How would you describe Udaipur to people who haven't seen it?
It is, of course, beauty itself. It is beauty itself. We had very little time to look at it, unfortunately, because we were working every day. But what I have seen of it is extraordinarily beautiful, but of course it is mixed up with beauty and poverty and misery. And this is extremely depressing. But live in surroundings that were beautiful, in a marvelous hotel, and we had a marvelous, wonderful time.
You've lived in the States, of course, for many years now. Is there anything you miss about France?
No, I miss nothing about France because I go back to France every year, sometimes twice a year. I was in Paris just a week ago. I'm going back Wednesday, and then I go for a vacation of 6 weeks, which I'm sure we're going to Crete, and then we're going to the Cyclades for 2 weeks, and then continental Greece for 6 weeks, and then we're going back to America.
Sounds delightful. I know one of your hobbies is cooking, and I only hope for the sake of your guests you don't borrow any recipes from Kamal.
No. I do very things, but I love it. I love to cook as long as I with it. I need the music, and this is marvelous relaxation and marvelous escape, and this is what we do in California.
The only Bond woman to repeat in a leading role is Maud Adams, who was first seen in Man with the Golden Gun. Swedish-born Maud now plays the title role in the 13th Bond thriller, Octopussy.
As her business, she owns shipping lines and hotels, carnivals, and circuses. And you soon discover that she uses her circus as a cover for smuggling operations, which is what she really enjoys doing. So she's a villainous character.
James.
Obviously, we're talking about fantasy here. We're talking about an adventure story, and you do expect the women to be glamorous and to be exciting and sexually attractive. But I don't think that's something that's exclusive to the women. Bond certainly is very much that type of a fantasy character for women.
There had been a long-standing policy not to repeat an actress in the Bond series, but producer Albert Broccoli felt Maud was perfect for the part.
You thought it was a pity that I died so soon in the first one.
Oh, and I watched it also. That's what kept me awake.
Find the way.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly all right. This interview is taking place in a hotel suite where people just keep wandering in.
So what did you watch on television?
Officer and a Gentleman.
Oh, had you not seen it before?
Mm.
Isn't it a wonderful film?
I wasn't sure whether I liked it. I couldn't think what it was all about for half an hour.
Girl's face and got off the long shot of the two nude bodies. And so I said to him, well, did that bother you a lot? And he said it bothered me tremendously because I had to use a zoom shot and I hate zooms. He says it's the only zoom in the movie.
Yeah, I wondered actually why watching it, why they had...
Fred, are you rolling?
Yes.
Oh, excuse me. All right. Okay.
So, well, we're discussing filth and stuff.
Yes.
X-rated, but anyway.
Roger, it is such a joy for me to be able to welcome you to Dallas because we have met on other occasions, once on the set in London.
Indeed we have.
Yes, and so it's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
It's your first retrospective, isn't it?
Yes, in retrospect it is my first retrospective, yeah.
I wonder, as you look back over some 3 decades of films, what kinds of thoughts are going through your mind?
Why?
You mean why?
Why a retrospective about my one performance? I mean, why, you know, sort of, it never occurred to me that I'd done anything at all. To warrant. I mean, there's so many better English actors we could have brought over, or even I suppose it was the language barrier. You wouldn't understand Marcello Mastroianni or Giancarlo Giannini or any of the other Europeans. Oh, Michael, you may not even understand Michael Caine. Michael does.
I think, Roger, that you're being too modest, but anyway, I'll accept that. I suppose that your image with the public, certainly today, would be the James Bond films. Would you agree to that?
Oh yes, absolutely. Because whatever is successful at that time means it's the one that most people go to see, or the people go to see most.
For you, what is the best thing and what is the worst thing about, then, the James Bond image?
What is the worst thing about it, or what's the best thing? Well, the best thing is, of course, is marketability, and you know, I am very realistic and aware that I am doing something, you know, that is popular throughout the world, and so that enhances my value for other films. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't feel bitter and sort of say, why can't I be Lord Olivier, you know? But they aren't really battering on his door either, you know. Well, no, we all get offers. What are the bad things about it? I think that the sheer hard work of the damn things. I mean, you've got to get up at the crack of dawn and for a solid 6 months and go through till late at night, sometimes all night. And they're physically very demanding.
I have been on location and on set with you, and I can attest to that they are.
They're physically demanding, and also in the sense that sort of being asked to do things that are tiring, in one sense, is not bad, you know, because your body is attuned. I exercise a lot. I like that. I like jumping around. What becomes hard about it is the boredom. Day after day, just jumping around and never saying a word. In fact, the longest speech I have in any Bond film is, "My name is Bond."
James Bond. That's what makes it long. I've said James Bond, I've added 2 words. Most of the time I say no, yes, thank you.
See, I don't think that people are aware of that unless they consciously looked at a Bond film with that in mind, because they do move and there's action, and it seems like you're conveying so many ideas and thoughts and all with the actions. I think...
But I'm making up jokes half the time, and I would say 90% of the jokes get cut out because they always go after a PG rating.
You mean you're ad-libbing jokes?
Yes.
That's to alleviate the boredom.
Yes, and also I think it's part of the character, because I don't believe in that sort of hero. I mean, it's comic book, and I don't think that type of hero exists. Certainly that type of spy doesn't exist. I mean, who ever heard of a spy that everybody knew? Walks into a bar and he says, "Oh, a vodka martini shaken, not stirred." Spies are supposed to be anonymous. They're people without faces. So that's why I have fun with it. Because I say, what is this?
Is it a problem for you when people recognize you? You just came off a scene.
Only if I'm sneaking out of a motel bedroom. No, it's a problem trying to do things like Christmas shopping. You know, when the stores are crowded and you really would like to look around, but you can't, so you just rush in and rush out. But you're all right with it as long as you keep moving. You mean in terms of people trying to kill you? I mean, they pull guns and try to shoot you. No, I mean
just,
autographs.
Well, and expecting you in person to be some kind of superhero.
No, I think audiences are smart. They know it's all held together with pieces of elastoplast and Band-Aids and string and thick makeup. They used to say, when I went there, 4,000 years ago, I made a television series called Ivanhoe. It was made before film. Shows you how long ago it was. In fact, it was made before there were knights. I think the knights got the idea of having knights from Walter Scott's Ivanhoe. Anyway, and at that time, I was sort of the Jack Haley. I was the Tin Man, because I galloped around in armor, and kids really thought that I had armor underneath my clothes. But days have gone. They've passed. I don't think that anymore.
Roger, has the character of James Bond changed any through the years?
Well, certainly since I started playing it, it changed from, you mean from the conception of the books or from the films?
Just even in the films.
Well, the films certainly, because Sean started doing it. And he did 6, and he was very different to me. George Lazenby did 1. He was very different to me, and he was also different to Sean. But they tried to make him in the Sean mode. When I took it over, I didn't deliberately say, I'm not going to do an imitation of Sean. I said, I don't do imitations, and it would be very silly. I'm English, he is Scottish. We have different personalities, and these sort of parts are built around the personality of the actor. The success of a show basically is on the personality of actors today. Writers will disagree, directors will disagree, of course, but it is personalities that people buy.
Is Sean going to do another Bond?
He is doing one at the moment called Never Say Never Again.
What's the point of that?
What's the point of calling it Never Say Never Again? No, what's the point of
doing it? No, I mean, what's the point, Roger, after all the...
Not from Sean's point of view. Greed on the part of the producers of the show. I think it's very obviously ripping off United Artists and Cubby Broccoli, although their contention is, this is Kevin McClory, that he gave the original idea of Thunderball to Ian Fleming and has the right to remake it. So presumably they're remaking Thunderball. But as regards Sean doing it, I would say, why not? Delighted. Actors should work. And Sean's a mate anyway, of mine.
You don't mind him doing Bond?
No, why would I mind?
Well, I don't know. I mean...
I'm sure that there must be probably 15 companies at this moment throughout the world playing Hamlet.
Well, that's a nice, generous, professional attitude, but I think...
It's not generous of me at all. Sean is stronger than I, and he'd punch me in my teeth if he saw this.
Now the truth comes out.
No. No, I think, why not? You know, we're not... You know, if it were a question that he came along and said, all right, you move over, I'm taking the part back. I'd say, well, it's a bit strong, Sean. I've done it, you know, for the last 10 years. You know, why would you come and take it back? No, he's not that at all. He is doing it for another company, another producer. It's not taking any of the bread out of my children's mouths.
And is he going to stop with just that one?
I would presume so, if they stick to the letter of what the agreement is. But I don't think Sean will want to do any more after that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Anyway, you have a new Bond coming out. We must talk about that very briefly, so I'll have something to put together with that. Octopussy.
Yes.
Coming out pretty soon.
Mid-June, I think, in America.
Now, is there anything particularly distinctive about Octopussy?
It's a difficult question because I don't understand it.
Well,
is there any distinctive about it?
right.
Is it any different to the other Bonds? Frankly, no, it's the same story. No, yes. We have different locales in this. We move to India, we have different girls, different villains.
What about some of the action sequences? Always in a Bond movie there is at least one action sequence that just goes through the roof for the audience.
Well, I hope we have a number of them in this one. We have the usual good pre-title sequence, which takes place in a South or Central American country, and then we move to India and to Germany and backwards and forwards. And I hear there's one sequence where you asked, before we were talking about believing in things. I'm being chased by Louis Jourdain, who is the villain, and he is Afghanistan. And so I'm chased on elephants by beaters and bearers and guns going off. I confront a tiger, snakes, crocodiles, giant spiders, horrible webs. I swing through the trees like Tarzan, and pull myself through a leech-infested swamp. I mean, that all takes place in the space of 3 minutes. But for me, it took about 3 to 4 months, that one sequence, I think, because we kept jumping around and coming back to the torture.
And having to be in the swamp day after day, huh?
Oh, yes, it was very pleasant.
What, have you sustained any injuries making Bond films?
Yes, most every film. Usually on Friday when I ask for the money. I get smashed around. Mark Q, if I, as I said before, I exercise a great deal. If I didn't do that, I'd be smashed around a great deal more because I would not have gone out of the way of most of the moving things that come flying at me. But
broken bones ever?
No, I've fractured the odd thing, and the most painful or recurring injury I have from Bond was from For Your Eyes Only, which was the last one, which was over 2 years ago, where on the ice I separated the clavicle and the acromioclavicular. It sounds wonderfully technical, doesn't it? But they and as a consequence, I had to work the next night, or I was asked to work the next night to finish the sequence. And so, being kind and generous, I said, all right. They had an Italian doctor, because we were shooting Cortina d'Ampezzo, and who was going to give me a local anesthetic. And he said it would last for about 4 hours, and I would be able to work. Well, I'd be able to throw my arm around like this without feeling the pain. And it should have been strapped up. And so I elected to have the local anesthetic so we could finish shooting and get out of Cortina. And as a consequence, the injury continued to bleed. and now I had problems with the shoulder, and it sort of flared up again on the last one, because it seemed half the time I was pulling Maud Adams, who plays Octopussy, over the edge of cliffs and saving everybody's way, always with my left hand hanging from trains. And so the shoulder really got irritated, along with me. But it was I remember when I was having the local anesthetic, they have blackouts in Italy, power blackouts. And the doctor had just started to fill his syringe, and all the lights went out in the hotel, and we were shooting at night. And he said, "Dove sei?" And I said, "I'm here, but you don't want to know where I am because you're not sticking the needle to me in the dark." And he's speaking Italian to me. Fortunately, I speak Italian. And he's chasing me, and by the sound of my voice, he's trying to find out. And then I feel the hand grab me. But do you hear that crack then? He grabs me by the arm, and he's trying to stick this needle in me in the dark. Oh, my Lord.
The strange thing that happened with to start with the power outage and just recount. Yeah.
Oh, in Italy they have what do we say? Power stoppages.
Power outage.
Power what?
Power outage.
Oh, power outage. That's rather nice. Anyway, the lights go off, elevators stop, and the doctor was trying to give me this local anesthetic just as the lights went off, and he chased me all over the room in the dark, trying to stick the needle in, and eventually grabbed me by the arm, and the needle went in about 6 different places.
All in the dark.
All in the dark, an awful bond, just to make United Artists rich and Cubby Broccoli rich.
Well, you have made us rich this morning with your visit. It's been most
Thank
pleasant.
you, aren't you kind?
Most pleasant, Roger. I look forward to the new film.
Thank you.
And I look forward to the retrospective that they're doing for you here in Dallas. And thank you for coming to visit us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
What do you think about Sean Connery doing another James Bond?
Well, I say, he's a fighter.
Our spotlight on this day of Oscar news is on the movies, starting with a story about Roger Moore. He's back working for producer Cubby Broccoli, playing James Bond again in Octopussy. But this time, Roger's biggest challenge isn't some supervillain from Smersh or Spectre. It's a rival 007, played by Sean Connery. And how does Roger react to this new complication? With his usual suave calm, as Ian Johnstone tells us in this behind-the-scenes report from London.
After 20 years of chasing arch-villains and voluptuous women across the movie screen, James Bond, Secret Agent 007, will be back this year, this time in 2 rival film versions. 12 years ago, Sean Connery said he would never play 007 again, but he is starring in the new Bond thriller, appropriately called Never Say Never Again, which proves where there's a buck, there's a way. Roger Moore, the man who succeeded Connery in the role and is doing so again for the 6th time in Octopussy, doesn't seem to be bothered by the competition.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Sean is Sean and I'm me, and you inject a lot of your personality that is right for the character into it. And it's basically, leading men have to be personalities, and his personality is different to mine. And so it comes out differently.
Roger, the son of a London policeman, has done very well for himself, considering he was a high school dropout who really yearned to be an artist. After years in the business, Moore eventually landed the role of Simon Templar, the secret agent, in the hit TV series The Saint. He's become quite comfortable and quite wealthy, playing spies.
Bond is a fairly cold fish. All I inject into him is, or I try to inject into him, is humour. I mean, he's not a spy. I mean, every barman in the world recognizes him. Yeah, James Bond, vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. I mean, that's not a real spy. Spy is coming from the cold.
I read biannually in the papers that you're not going to do another Bond and you want more money from Cubby. Is this just a publicity stunt?
No, I really didn't think I was going to do this one. I have now done 6, and I think 6 is enough.
Much of Octopussy is set in India, but much more of it is being shot in a place built to look like India, Pinewood Studios outside London. Roger Moore and James Bond are both known to be suave, debonair and sophisticated. But Moore is a married man and Bond is a bachelor. Does he take the role home with him?
Oh yes, I drive home at 140 miles an hour, and I usually make love to a couple of people I meet in the hotel lobby. No, of course not. There's nothing goes home with me. No, I haven't Italian wife. And it's quite simple. She stands behind me with a knife.
Thank you very much for joining Cinema Showcase and join me now in welcoming Desmond Llewellyn. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
When you first began the James Bond series, you were not in the first film, Dr. No.
No.
Q did
no.
not make his appearance until...
Well, he
with
did,
Love.
only in a different character.
Ah, I see. When the series began, did you have any idea that it would turn out to be as incredibly successful as it has been?
No. I don't think anybody could have thought so. I mean, after all, this is our 21st year, 21 years of Bond. It really is quite incredible.
It is. It is. What do you think is it about the Bond films that keeps audiences coming back in droves?
Well, it is pure escapism. I mean, you sit there, you watch these beautiful girls, the wonderful scenery, everything. But I think really, if you want to go back into it in depth, that it all goes back to Ian Fleming and Cubby Broccoli and the producers and people of the films have obeyed his dictum. Because he was asked, I think before he most likely started writing the books, what was the ingredients, the best ingredients for a thriller? And he said, to any shocker story, add all the ingredients of expensive living. Give Bond the right background, the right clothes, and the right girls. Set your stories in the most beautiful and exotic places. Describe everything in minute detail. For instance, he doesn't have a cocktail. It is shaken, not stirred. All details. Mm-hmm. And then take your story along at such a speed that nobody will notice the idiosyncrasies of the story. I mean, all right, Bond smokes these rather expensive cigarettes. Well, I mean, we know that's ridiculous. I mean, he'd only have to leave one in a hotel and the chap would come along and say, oh, Bond the spy's been here.
So take it along at such a fast clip that nobody notices.
Nobody notices.
Yeah.
And everything is bigger than life. Mm-hmm. I mean, you go into a hotel, all right, for you and me to go into your hotels here, you think, gosh, this is wonderful. What a fantastic place. But what about the people who usually, I mean, who live in that sort of atmosphere? When they see a Bond film, even they gasp. Because I don't care what the name of your hotel is, in what town it is in, the best hotel is not good enough for Bond. It is made even more beautiful, more luxurious. The girl behind the desk may be an absolute knockout, but she's not good enough for Bond. We have someone even better. So I think that is the thing, that it is bigger, better, and it is pure escapism. You can sit back there and all the worries of the world just wash over you while you sit back in this world of real make-believe.
The character of Q is such an interesting one, and I'm wondering, when you took over the role in the second film, how much of it was actually clearly defined in the script or by Ian Fleming, or how much was added?
Oh no, in the first film, I mean, it was purely this man comes in and he demonstrates the briefcase. And I mean, there was really no character in the part. You were just explaining, you press this button, you did this and you did that. And I did it, and obviously people liked it, but I mean, anybody could have done it. Mm-hmm. And then in the second film, Goldfinger, I luckily was asked to play the part again, and I remember distinctly, because I was working in my workshop, and Bond comes in, and I'm going to show him the new Aston Martin, and I got up to greet him. And the director, which was Guy Hamilton, said, no, you don't do that. You don't take any notice of him. I said, well, why? I mean, what? He said, oh, no, you don't like Bond. And, you know, one had these terrific notices. The films have been so successful, James Bond, the great hero, you know, and I sort of think, well, why don't I like him? And he said, well, you see, he treats you, all your I mean, that suitcase, for instance, you gave him, he just treated it with disrespect. I mean, he didn't sort of thank you for it or anything, so you don't really like Bond. And then, thanks to the Richard Mainbaum, who was writing the scripts in those days, one saw that angle and worked on that, and one tried to keep it up. But of course it's difficult because various different authors have different ideas for Q.
Yeah.
I mean, if we'd had one author going right the way through, I mean, Q would have been simple because he would have latched on to what had happened first and one would have gone through. But then every different author altered Q slightly and I had to alter him back to get into what my idea. But now we're back again with Michael Wilson, who's a new author, and Richard Mainbaum. And in this new film, they've given me what I call the Q. He's grumpy and disagreeable to Bond and thinks what a nuisance he is. But again, one's got to be very careful. I watched the rough cut of this, that he doesn't become too disgruntled. You know, that it doesn't become too monotonous.
Yeah.
So if I'm asked to do it in the next film and I sort of got roughly the same part, one has got to watch that very carefully.
Q probably looks upon Bond as sort of a wayward son, perhaps.
Yes, I think that's a very good way of looking at it. I think he obviously, he must respect him and like him, but he just thinks he's a damn nuisance.
So actually then we can thank Guy Hamilton back in Goldfinger for giving you the sort of...
giving the clue, yes.
The clue
definitely,
as to how to do that.
Yes. And then all the other directors naturally have helped as the films have progressed.
We have a retrospective, a brief retrospective of some of your appearances in the Bond films, and I think it begins with one of the early Sean Connery ones and on up into the Roger Moore ones. So why don't we take a look at that and then perhaps come back and comment on some of the various gadgets you've invented.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's take a look at that right now.
An ordinary black leather case with 20 rounds of ammunition here and here. An ordinary tin of talcum powder. Inside, a tear gas cartridge. That goes in the case against the side here like that. It's magnetized so it won't fall. Shut the case. Now, normally to open a case like that, you move the catches to the side. If you do, the cartridge will explode in your face. You got it?
Yes, I think so.
Is that all, sir?
Yes, thanks very much.
Right. Go.
That's a nasty little Christmas present. So if I heard correctly, Scaramanga got away.
Yes, sir.
The car, the sprouted wings.
Oh, that's perfectly feasible, sir. As a matter of fact, we're working on one now.
Oh, Q, shut up.
This is now being issued as standard equipment. Strap it on your wrist. It's activated by nerve impulses from the wrist muscles.
Like this? Very novel, Q. You must get them in the stores for Christmas.
Ah, there you are, 007.
Balls, Q?
Bolus, 007. Good. Have that ready for Army Day.
Yes, sir.
I want that ready for Ahmed's tea party.
Look what Q's brought for us. Isn't it nice?
Right. Now, pay attention, 007. I want you to take great care of this equipment. There are one or two rather special accessories.
Q, have I ever let you down?
Frequently.
I see you managed to get the latest back together again.
I disregard these jibes about our equipment, 007. I don't suppose you find it funny in the field.
Indeed, I don't.
Now she comes.
Rubbish. They're
simply not stepping up the reception sufficiently to enable...
Oh, shut up, Q.
A retrospective look at the adventures of Q, as portrayed by my guest, Desmond Llewellyn. You have had some incredible adventures in the Bond films.
I certainly have. But my word, doesn't it age one?
Now, this is the original
This is the original case, and as you'll see, we've both aged in the service of Bond. I'm afraid the knives don't come out anymore. They used to, as you saw in the film, they flashed out, then they flopped out, and now they just won't come out at all. We still got the tear gas cartridge, but we haven't anything else.
Well, I
that
think it's
really
good the
works.
knives don't come out, because one is coming
I
right
know,
here.
right into
know,
you, yes.
Yeah. That's amazing. So this is actually...
This is actually 20 years old.
20 years old.
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, you haven't aged a bit.
Nope.
The case, perhaps, maybe.
Nonsense. I was going to be very impolite then, but I remembered I'm on television.
Of all of the incredible inventions that Q has been responsible for, is there one that the public still finds most fascinating?
Well, I think they still think of the Aston Martin. You know, there'd never been anything like it before. I mean, this incredible car, and again, there's nothing new in that. I mean, after all, aeroplanes have ejector seats, so why shouldn't a car? And incidentally, when they tried out the ejector seat for the first time, when they fitted it in the car, luckily they put a dummy in the driving seat because it went straight through the roof of Pinewood Studios. But no, the knives come out of the wheels. Well, it happened in Ben-Hur. And the oil slicks and all those various things. Well, in America in Prohibition times, I believe the booze runners and all those, they had all those tricks.
Sure.
But the point is that it was all collected and put into one car.
Do people expect you, Desmond Llewellyn, the actor, to be technologically
yes,
superior in these matters?
Oh, I'm afraid they do.
And are
I
you?
mean, no, I'm not, because as I always tell people, my wife's got one of these watches, you know, that tells the date and the time. When you get to February or in June, you see, you've got to move it on. Well, I twist the handles and she twists the handles, and sometimes we can't make it work, and I have to take it into a shop, and the shop they're like, but you can't make it work. And I said, well, I'm afraid I can't.
That's marvelous. When the change came about when Sean Connery left the series and was temporarily replaced by George Lazenby, was there any concern for the future of the series, or did everyone have confidence that the series itself was so strong it would continue?
Well, I don't know, you see. I'm just a sort of, I mean, I am an actor, I'm engaged, I'm not on a contract or anything like that, so one is only engaged for the film. And when Sean left, you know, one didn't know what was going to happen. I don't think one concerned whether the series was going to run or not, because, you know, one hoped them to get more work or whatever it was. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that in those days I wasn't involved in the films.
Right.
And really it wasn't until, well, Diamonds Are Forever, when I did a promotion tour as I'm doing now, and I had to learn about the gadgets. I mean, I thought that most of them were jolly nice things, but I didn't realize that they all worked. And then I started to get interested, and as I'm talking to you now, I had to learn something about the background of Bond and all that, so that I could chat away as I am now. And it is then that I got interested in the Bond and became more involved in them. And as the films have progressed, I've sort of, well, the part has grown slightly too, which is nice.
You know, as you probably are certainly aware, there are those people who are absolute James Bond fanatics who know every single thing about all the Bond films.
Fantastic.
And I mean, I'm a Bond fan. I love the films, but
yes, but you can't tell me all my lines, can you?
No, and some people can.
Well, I can. I know, it's amazing because I've learned quite a lot. When I was talking to a chap the other day, and I said something about, I can't remember which film it was, and I said, well, I was doing, and out came, well, I can't remember the lines, but I presume they were right. No, it is, I've never met such fanaticism as there are about these Bond people. And it is awfully nice when you go around and you meet people, you know, that they all know about the films, and you can talk to them about it.
Let's talk about this latest one, Octopussy. For those watching who have yet to see the film, could you tell us something about the story of this one?
Oh dear. It is fairly complicated. Let me just give you one little demonstration.
Okay.
Not demonstration, that's the wrong thing, but in here...
We're not going to blow up, are
No,
we?
we're not.
Okay.
We have the Fabergé egg. Well, now, this was made by Claude Fabergé for the Tsars, you see, and it is in Russia. And this sort of is the basis, one of the bases of the stories. This gets stolen from the Russians. It goes from East Germany to West Germany to India to Britain, and Bond gets hold of it. I won't tell you how. He gives it to Q, who, in this little coach, he puts a homing device so that you can follow the egg wherever it goes. And sort of, this is one of the main things, but then they've got a circus in it. Oh, I think it's one of the most exciting films I've seen for ages. Absolutely on the end of your seat. It goes at, as I was saying at the beginning, at such a speed that you don't really realize what nonsense it is.
And you figure rather more prominently in this one than you
Yes,
have in
I'm
the
very lucky. I'm actually in the field. I'm not confined to my workshop. There's a nice scene of me in the workshop with Roger Moore, and then I get into a balloon with Roger Moore, or Bond, as I should say, and we go, I won't say to the rescue of the girls, because they've already done a very good job. But Bond leaves the balloon while it's miles up, not miles up, up in the air, and crashes through a window to save Octopussy, and I'm left in the balloon, and I see a villain down below who is just going to shoot one of the attractive girls, and I land the balloon on him, and I land the balloon and actually get kissed by a beautiful girl, so Q's coming on.
Really, indeed. One of Bond's frequent lines has always been, it's always so rough out there in the field. So this time Q actually goes in the field too.
Yeah, well, it's not so rough for Q. He's having a very good time.
One of the marvelous things about all the Bond films I've felt has been the music. And in this film, I'm happy to note that John Barry has returned as the composer, because he's written the music for, I think, most of the Bond films.
I think a lot of the more successful ones.
But music does play a big part in these films, doesn't it?
I think a terrific amount. And I think, you know, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, I think the music in that was absolutely wonderful. That We Have All the Time in the World, sung by Louis Armstrong.
Beautiful song.
I think, for me, that was the best theme tune of the whole lot.
I'm glad you bring that film up, because this, we were talking earlier, was probably the least successful commercially of the Bond films, but in many ways was an extraordinary film. And do you suppose that the reason it was not that commercially successful was because it had neither Sean Connery nor Roger Moore in the role?
Well, it's difficult to say, and we don't know, but I firmly maintain the reason it wasn't a success because James Bond wasn't played by an actor. You cannot get people off the streets. I mean, I know he was, he's done a lot of films since, and most likely is good, but he's had no training whatsoever. And how can you expect a man to portray Bond, especially when you're going to follow Sean Connery?
Yeah, exactly.
But no, if you look at it really dispassionately, he didn't give all that bad performance, but unfortunately he got across the press and the press didn't like him.
But the film was
The film is, I think, absolutely smashing. It's got the most beautiful scenery and most beautifully directed by Peter Hunt. And if it had had Sean Connery in it, or if it had Roger Moore, I think it would have, by sort of film buffs, would have been equal to Russia with Love, which I think most people will agree was perhaps the greatest of all the Bond films.
Do you have a personal favorite?
Yeah, Russia with Love. I think
favorite.
it's the most lovely film. It's so amusing. Again, got the most lovely music. It's got beautiful background. It's got everything. I think as most of the Bond films have, but that is perhaps a little special.
Is there a danger, do you think, in the Bond films trying to top one another? Do you think they can go too far in trying to top the previous one? Because From Russia with Love, let's face it, was basically simple compared to the others in terms of money and all of that.
Yes, it's an interesting thing that. But I think they seem to work it out, because after all, you had Moonraker, this enormous space thing, and people loved it when it came out. They all said, "Oh, this is the best film I've ever seen, best Bond." And then gradually they look back and they say, "Oh no, I think there was a bit too much space and all that." But now, instead of trying to top Moonraker, they changed it completely, and they had For Your Eyes Only, which was a much simpler going back, and people all came away, "Oh, what a marvelous film! You know, that was terrific. That's a best Bond film I've ever seen." Then they think, well, perhaps not quite enough, actually. You know, this, and now we've got this new one, Octopussy, which is, I mean, it's got absolutely everything. What they're going to do with the next one, I don't know. But
Octopussy now has been produced by Albert Broccoli, who has
Yes,
done all of the Bond
one of them,
films
yeah.
released by MGM-UA. Now, as everyone probably knows, there is another Bond film due out later in the fall, I believe, with
Yes.
Sean Connery, again playing Bond.
Mm.
Now, were you approached to be in this film, or do you know anything about this film?
no, I know nothing about this film whatsoever.
Mhm.
I've learned a certain amount during on this tour from people chatting to me, but I mean, really, I know
I'm just
absolutely
wondering
nothing about it.
if there will be a Q in it, if there will be a...
I've
Miss
heard
Money
there
in it.
is, yes, and I've heard I only heard today, actually, is played by a man I know, but I don't know how true it is. I
Well,
mean,
as everyone,
be interesting to see.
Well, as everyone knows, Q is Desmond Llewellyn. So
Oh, well.
Is it true that that Ian Fleming, when it was known that films would be made of the Bond films, suggested Roger Moore originally for the part of Bond? I had heard that.
Well, I've heard that, but I don't know how true that is. I think it might quite easily have been. But of course, Fleming may have had his idea what Bond looked like and everything, but he never described Bond. There's no description of him in the book. And in fact, I read somewhere when they were talking about Fleming that he himself said that he never gave Bond very much character on purpose. He didn't describe him, and he didn't give him much character, so that the person who was reading the book could put the overcoat on and become Bond.
Interesting.
Which is an interesting thing, you see.
What to you are the major differences between Roger Moore's interpretation of Bond and Sean Connery's?
Roger is a much softer, I mean, he hasn't got that ruthlessness the whole time that Sean had, and Sean hasn't got perhaps the suavity that Roger has got. So that the people who saw Sean first naturally prefer him and think that Roger is too smooth, and people who see Roger first think that Sean is perhaps too tough and too
rough. Yeah.
So, you know, well, we've got the two Bonds.
Yeah.
And they are very, I mean, they play it very the same. I mean, they're tough individuals. And they haven't, the authors and everything, I mean, they haven't modernized Bond. Bond is still Commander James Bond of the Royal Navy. He isn't Colonel Jimmy Bond of the SAS or, you know, and he still wears his immaculate clothes. He doesn't go about in jeans and a sweatshirt. So they have sort of, I mean, they're all that, he is still the XRN.
I think that's an encouraging sign of continuity. That,
No, I think so, yes. Yes.
And also Lois Maxwell returns this time as Miss Moneypenny.
Yes, she's Miss Moneypenny.
Sadly,
She's
Bernard
been in
Lee,
them all.
Bernard Lee died, unfortunately.
No, Bernard died,
several
but they've
years ago.
got a very good actor, Robert Brown, playing the part. So I don't, well, I mean, we're not going to miss anything. I don't mean that we shall miss Bernard naturally, because he was such a very strong personality. But Brown's a very, very good actor, and I mean, people who've never seen, this will be their first Bond film, I mean, he will be M.
Exactly. Well, from the scenes we have seen, it looks like a marvelous film, and I want to thank you so much for coming by and talking about it. And
Well, a pleasure.
if you're in Atlanta again, I hope you'll stop by.
I certainly will.
Thank you very
much.
My thanks to all of you. Until next time, good night.
Despite the mixed reviews from critics at the time, the film went on to be a financial success.
There is continuity in the movie business. The James Bond series continues to roll on. Octopussy is the 13th Bond film, and it stars Roger Moore as Agent 007 fighting against a beautiful jewel smuggler named Octopussy, played by Maud Adams. And also he's fighting against a crazy Russian general who doesn't want the Russians to get any more friendly with the Americans. This film has a very intricate story. Suffice it to say that Bond wants to stop the general from blowing up Europe and stop Octopussy from smuggling. Unfortunately, one of the women who works for Octopussy is tough to control as she steals a jeweled egg from Bond himself. Now, later in the film, the situation is much more perilous when Bond comes face-to-face with Maud Adams as Octopussy. They seem to have a lot in common, and at this point in the film, they're both dodging a creep with a yo-yo buzzsaw. That's good enough to be the conclusion of most movies, and that's in the middle of this picture. Now, with those two scenes, you get a good sense of what this latest James Bond film is about. It's about action scenes, terrific action scenes, but it's also short a little bit on character. The villains are not memorably bad. They're just stock villains. No one is memorable as that classic villain Auric Goldfinger. That was a great name and a great character. Still, I enjoyed this Bond more than the last few, and for that reason, I have to credit the action scenes. Some of them are really quite amazing. I love that dicing yo-yo.
I don't know, Gene. I had a real feeling of deja vu. I felt I'd seen this movie again and again and again. All the obligatory scenes. He has dinner with a villain right before he's going to be killed. He goes to bed with the heroine, and then they're separated.
But Raj, it's supposed to be that way.
Scene. And then another thing that bothered me, all through these movies, there's always been this business of the double entendres, the lines of dialogue with two meanings. Never before this movie have they been written so dumbly. You get all kinds of bad laughs from the audience because the dialogue is so inept.
I think you're throwing out the film for just a little bit of dialogue. I think that the Bond film has a very classic structure, and I think this film stays with it. I think if it became a different series, I don't think we'd be as interested in it. In addition, I don't think you can name an action picture that has had such good action scenes as this one.
Too much action. I would have liked one less chase scene. I just felt that I had seen all this before.
I had never seen some of this stunt work done before. This is really
just take
special.
the train chase that we started the show with. You remember the movie Emperor of the North with Lee Marvin had the same train.
Not as exciting as this. This is exciting action.
I think we disagree.
Octopussy, the action-filled James Bond adventure starring Roger Moore. I really enjoyed the action scenes, but Roger felt it was a retread.
After being absent in For Your Eyes Only due to tax problems, John Barry returned to do his 9th Bond score. Barry made frequent references to the James Bond theme to reinforce Octopussy as the official Bond film. Given that the motif could not be featured in Never Say Never Again, and opted to include only subtle references to the music of India. He also wrote the opening theme, All Time High, with lyricist Tim Rice. All Time High, sung by Rita Coolidge, is one of 7 musical themes in the James Bond series, whose song titles do not refer to the film's title.
All I wanted was a sweet distraction for an hour or two. For you, they're true.
From Seiko comes the world's first ever TV watch. And in the movie Octopussy, James Bond is never without it. The technological breakthrough in the classic 007 tradition. With a clear liquid crystal display screen. For the man who does everything with style. Seiko Quartz, the future never looked so good.
And now a gallery of pictures for merchandise produced under the Octopussy name.
Funny how it always goes in love. When you don't look, you find. But then we're two of a kind. We move as one. We're an all-time high. Change all that's gone before, doing so much more, and just falling in love. don't want to waste a waking moment. I don't want to sleep, 'cause I'm in so strong and so deep. And so in my time I've said these words before, but now I realize all my heart is telling me lies. But with you, they're all true. On an all-time high, I'll change all that's gone before, doing so much more. Just falling in love on an all-time high.
Don't forget to buy little Timmy that spin saw toy for Christmas. The Atari Octopussy game was an ambitious project tied to the James Bond movie Octopussy, aiming to capture the excitement and action of the film. Developed by Parker Brothers, the game was based on the thrilling train sequence from the movie. Players were to navigate through various challenges, battling gunmen and knife throwers, while leaping between train carriages, and collecting Fabergé gems. Despite extensive marketing efforts, including advertisements in comics and magazines, the game was ultimately cancelled. Although the game James Bond 007 was released by Parker Brothers in 1984 on various consoles.
Oh, James!
Really, 007?